Hello.
Hi.
So Sally Foley-Lewis here with another episode of the Spark Self-Leadership series. And I'm absolutely tickled pink to steal some time from this very, very clever and wonderful woman, Lisa Lockland Bell, to talk all about voice and self-leadership. So hello, Lisa.
Hi. How are you?
Good to see you.
It is.
Good to be next to you. Well, there's three of us in the room. There's Lisa, the microphone, and myself.
We're going to have Mike.
Yeah,
Mike's a good guy.
Mike's a great guy. So, Lisa, who are you? Tell us who you are.
Wow. Where do I start? Look, primarily, my label is I am a vocal coach. That covers two primary different areas. So I work with singers and have a studio that really focuses on young developing singers who want to have a career in the profession, as well as adults. You know, there's other people as well. But I also have another arm where I work with executives and work on executive presence and having the ability to be really strong and confident in every conversation.
Oh, that's the bit that's
the juicy bit. That's why we're here.
Like I love that you work with young people, because I think that I listen to schools and situations that are happening with different schools and programs that get cut because of funding and all sorts of stuff. So the fact that you're out there and you have a big footprint in the future of our leaders, impacting them, I think is fantastic. So keep up that good work. However, today, my little brain wants to dive into yours about the link between voice and self-leadership. So let's kick off with, first of all, in your mind, how would you define self-leadership?
Great question, Sally. Look, I think that for me, and I'll come very much from my background and my experience.
Please.
My self-leadership for myself really began when I was diagnosed with cancer. And that was the turning point for me in my life, as it is for most people that have cancer. I grew up with a father who was a bipolar schizophrenic. So my cognitive development was impacted, and I didn't realize that till years later. And of course, my family at the time didn't realize that was the case. And so fast forwarding to being diagnosed, I was at the conservatorium. I was studying to become a grand diva, an opera singer. And I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease.
Right.
And to really focus in on your question, when you get a diagnosis, and I can't speak for getting a diagnosis in the middle to later years of your life, but getting a diagnosis at the very beginning in your young adulthood really had a huge impact, because I came out of that center with the doctors, and they've said, you've got stage 3 cancer, and we don't know what's caused it or why. There's no rhyme or reason. And at the time, I wasn't self-aware. I didn't have any particular faith. I wouldn't say that I was spiritual. In fact, I would probably say that I was completely lost. But there was one thing that happened, and that was my father, who was still alive at the time, was going through a lot in himself. And he introduced me to a lady who was a Reiki master, which is a form of hands-on healing. And it was really the introduction to her that started to open my mind to go, you have control over this. And to a degree, I was responsible for what was happening in my world. And so
quite confronting.
Very confronting, but empowering at the same time. For me, it was a moment of pure bliss, because it was really, I can actually lead myself out of this. I have the power. It's not the doctor pointing the stick at you and saying, you know, you could die. It's, well, you've got yourself here through a series of events and having a father and growing up in an environment that was traumatic to a very young, sensitive girl, to understand that there was an alternative. And this was the beginning of Louise Hay. It was the beginning of the alternative movement in the Western world. So we're going back 30 years now. To know that there is research, science, books, language, conversation, training, etc., that I could tap into that wasn't going to cost me a lot of money. It was really about starting to read.
Yes.
I started to read my way out of the hole and really started to change the way that I operated, from my mindset to who I hung around, to what I ate, to what I believed in, who I was fundamentally, and started to lead myself into a direction, because I do think that leadership essentially is a very lonely path, because you have to make decisions that are going to go against the pack.
Yes.
And so for me, I had to make decisions that went against what my family believed and what I'd been brought up in, and certainly even, you know, the area in which I was working in entertainment. It was a woo-woo hippie language, and I still affectionately call it woo-woo hippie. But it was something that was very foreign to me, but I intuitively knew, and I think this is also part of great leadership, that I could trust my intuition and I could trust my gut. And that was the thing that was going to lead me out. And I never, ever questioned that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think only now is it almost acceptable around a boardroom to say, well, what's your gut feel on that? And only then you'll get a couple of sideways glances. So I just really resonate with what you're saying about trusting your intuition, and love that piece about reading yourself out of the hole. You know, what a gift that Reiki master gave you to put at your feet and say, you got here. And you can get out of here.
Well, I look back at it too in reflection and go, my dad, while he had mental health issues, and, you know, back then he was diagnosed as being a manic depressant. And so that today is bipolar. And so he was misdiagnosed, mistreated, and through that he suffered terribly. But underneath all of that, he could see that I was going down the same path. And so I think that light moment where he could say, this is a person that I think is going to help take you out of this path and not follow that direction, was certainly one of those pivotal moments in my life where I went, thanks, Dad. Yeah. One thing you gave me.
And what a piece of clarity in his world too. And I imagine we're talking more than 5 or 10 years ago now. So, you know, when mental health was treated and dealt with very differently. So my first job out of university was in a psychiatric hospital. So I hear you, sister. And the medical model being the way it was, and probably is to some degree still today, for your dad to have that clarity in that moment, given what he was going on with, I totally resonate that. What a gift. And I really appreciate you have such a, you know, this is your unique view on self-leadership. And I think when I get the privilege of hearing lots of different people's views on self-leadership, and hearing such a unique one, to me is a gift to anyone who listens to this, to go, all right, how do I expand my own worldview on what self-leadership is? Because maybe we've got some people watching and listening to this who hadn't even thought about the woo-woo hippie.
Yeah. Well, I've never, you know, but certainly back in those times, and, you know, even as recently as the last couple of years, I never really viewed myself as being a leader. But when you look back and you look at the train of events, I do really understand now that I did lead myself out of that 100% and found my purpose in amongst it all.
Isn't it funny that you say you didn't, and I've known you for a while, and I see you very much as a leader, but yeah, that inner view versus the outer view.
I love that saying, you do you, I'll do me. And I think that that's just, certainly cancer gave me a different angle on it. I know that some of my industry look at me and say, you know, we've always looked at you as the entrepreneurial brain. And I'm like, really? You know, I'm just doing what I do and trying to survive.
Yeah.
But I think within that has exposed my ability to, you know, there's a story, and I don't know where this came from, but there was a study done by Harvard University on what their top leaders felt was the two attributing factors, or the best factors that they felt had made them great leaders and really successful. And the two things that they said were trusting their gut and meditation. And when you look at some of the great leaders, we're not talking some leaders, and we shall.
You're talking about them. Contemporary leaders of today.
Contemporary leaders with bad hair. Let's just say that. Okay, we're not talking about that.
We're not talking about any leader that has a bad hairdo.
No. If you look at them, they have that essence of, and when you talk to them, and you know, there's so much access to seeing leaders on podcasts or interviews or whatever it is today, and most of them say, I just trust my gut. I knew that at that moment it was the right thing to do.
Yeah. And I don't believe your gut usually lets you down.
No.
You let yourself down when you choose to ignore what your gut tells you often. And hands down for myself, I know that the minute I go, I hear you, but I choose something different, the next thing is I should have listened and stuck to what my gut told me what to do.
Yeah, well, that's a choice. And I think that comes from your own self-belief system and perhaps where you've come from in your upbringing and your culture and what happens there. I know certainly for myself, I always tie back to being bullied as a child. The biggest mistake my parents made, and they didn't know any better, it's not a blame or a point the finger game, but the biggest mistake that they made was they said, just ignore them. So, you know, coming from my woo-woo hippie and my training around the voice, when those people are spewing that, you know, venom, accusation, name calling, whatever it is, I'm having a physical reaction to that from the vibration of what's coming out of them. Yeah. The sympathetic vibration is making me go into fight and flight mode and going, I'm not safe here. Yes. Okay. So for my parents then to say to this, again, very sensitive, creative little girl who's an empath and feels everything's really on the surface very prickly all the time anyway, that was the worst thing they could say, because then I started processing it and going, well, does that mean that what I feel is bad? And I should try and feel something else. Right. So it constantly reaffirmed that who you are is not good enough. Yeah. And so I would, any time that I'd have that feeling, I'd have that in my head because it'd been told to me so many times, just ignore them. And that I was the problem. Whereas years later in therapy and you do the work. Doing the work is no, I was actually right. What it should have been, well, what the response should have been from my parents was, okay, tell me what you are feeling. Yes. Why does it feel like that? Yes. What do you think your response should be? Et cetera, et cetera. And honoring that, yes, you're right. What you're feeling is good. And valid. And valid. Yeah. Not dismissing it. And, you know, I talk a lot about that whole bullying piece with what's coming out with the voice makes us feel that underneath our skin. Yeah. Let's and thank you for sharing that. I think there's some vulnerability in sharing that. So thank you. I don't want to skip past that. Yeah. It needs to be acknowledged. So thank you.
And I guess that's interesting, if I can do a really dodgy segue into the workplace then, when we are maybe surrounded by a whole range of different personalities, and how do we as leaders then have the voice that is driven by our gut, and knowing from an inside perspective, knowing what I should be saying, yet we dampen it down, yet we alter it to a group think, or we alter it to what we think might be the right thing to do. What's your take on that when it comes to the voices in workplaces these days, particularly for leaders?
It's a massive conversation, and there's so many different angles that I can come at that from. I think
whatever's the top one that comes to mind for you.
I think fundamentally, let's go with the situation that's very, very common, and I hear a lot, and that's for women sitting at the table and I'm not being heard. Okay. And there's, I'll be as bold to say there's a little bit of blame there, and going, you're not listening to me. Well, maybe the way that you're saying it is actually not being delivered so that we can listen to it the right way. And what I mean by that is that, you might deliver a really great idea, and then Tom, who's sitting at the table, let's call him Tom, comes in, and your idea doesn't get taken on board, but Tom comes in next week and says the same thing, twisted around, and some bells and whistles added on it, and everyone thinks it's the greatest idea in the world.
Yes.
Now, how many times have we heard that story?
Yes.
What's happening most of the time, and I'm generalizing, so forgive me, but what's happening most of the time is that the woman is delivering it. Now, there's self-doubt. There's processing going on that shouldn't be going on, because it's, how do I say it in the way that they want to hear it, rather than how do I say it that's in a way that's connected to me, that is my passion, my shtick, that's going to get them excited.
Yes. Yeah.
Usually in that presentation, it could be a pitch idea about a direction or an idea or a product, whatever it is, and all the inflections are going the wrong way.
Oh, at the end of the sentence?
Yes.
To make it a question?
Even just, hi, my name's Jenny Smith, and I'm here today to tell you about this fabulous new product that I've got going on.
It's so candy.
Okay. But if they deliver it that way, and, tie back to an example of that, I was working with a senator down in Sydney who was doing a huge presentation to 3 of the biggest male influencers in the country. Let's just say that. And she was a lawyer and very, very cleverly put this presentation together. And she started exactly that way. Oh. It was, my name's Jenny, and I'm happily married, and I've got 3 beautiful children, and I live in Sydney.
And stop right there.
Exactly. And I literally said, stop. And I said straight away, are you happily married? And she took offense to it and said, why? What are you talking about? And I said, well, you're delivering this to 3 key men, right? They're not going to intellectualize and say, oh, she's got her inflections going the wrong way. It's okay. They're just going to go, there's something about it that I don't believe or that I don't like. So that delivery piece, how you're delivering that idea, it's not the idea that's the problem. It's not because you're female. It's because there's other issues going on in you and your self-belief system. Maybe it's in your upbringing, and the voice is not supporting you in your profile. I talk about that all the time, that the voice is not supporting you in the profile. So you haven't got a handle and a control on the way that your voice is going to deliver that information.
I don't want to go past that. I want people to really hear that. And I think your voice doesn't support you in your profile, I think is such a critical piece to really reflect on. And that bit about, while we can blame the people in the room for not listening to us, what part do we bring to that, I think is really important. And I think for anybody who's listening to this, when you do have someone at the table who is trying to deliver an idea, then maybe you have a responsibility to help them to actually address the issue of their voice, to be heard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not just sit there and say what a rubbish delivery, or let the next person pick up and run with it and take the credit, but actually stop and have that private moment and say, I think you've got a good idea, but it's not landing. I think you even know and can tell in your gut it's not landing.
Yeah, they know. And it serves them in some way.
Yes.
It serves them in some way. There's something that's going unconsciously in them, and it could be self-sabotage, imposter, whatever it is. You could be having personal issues that's coming through. So your voice is very sticky, okay? Everything that you've gone through in your life, from your upbringing to how educated you are, where you live, who you associate with, your voice.
Just running through my head.
Your voice is a reflection of that. So every time you open your mouth and when people speak, I'm doing my woo-woo hippie and I'm translating that into being abused. This is going on, da-da-da-da-da-da. I feel it intuitively that this is what's going on. Now, again, at that table, they don't have the time or the space to analyze. Poor Jenny's, she doesn't mean to sound like she's not educated and that she doesn't know what she's talking about.
Yes.
Because she does, because her profile tells us she's successful. But her voice is giving her up. It's not supporting her. And she needs to go away and work on that from a whole range of approaches so that the voice, when she stands up, it's going to lead and break the unconscious bias that may be at the table.
Yes. Yeah. And
So
I like that it might be at the table.
It might be at the table.
Yeah, I like that. Let's not make a huge assumption that it's everybody else. Yeah, definitely. I love that. And I think what I'm hearing you say is when we've done that, then it comes with it is that ramping up and firing up of more confidence and therefore more influence and even more courage to present in alignment with who our profile is.
Absolutely. And I think that's being at that table is an opportunity to inspire and evoke other ideas. You want to be that person that, you could have a CEO sitting at the table. Here's your presentation and says, that's great. Thanks, Jenny. What if we took that to the next level? And you go, awesome. I hadn't thought of it on that level. And then that's my objective. And when I go into that space, it's always a question before I walk into the room of how do I want these people to feel when I leave?
Yes. Yeah.
When I walk out, what is the legacy? Because ultimately that's what the voice is. It's an experience and it's a vibration. You're leaving a part of yourself, not just in the room, but in these people.
Imprinted.
It's imprinted. It's underneath their skin. And how do I want them to feel? Because the voice will go wherever you want it to go. But if you are giving it that direction to go, I want them to feel, for me, it's always safe. I want them to feel safe. So how do I have to turn up so that they're going to feel safe? It's not about me. It's about how they're going to feel. Too often it's around the other way.
You know what? It's so funny you said safe. I have, and as I said before, I've known you for so long that it's just fascinating because that's the exact word I would have said about you.
Right. Oh, that's nice. Thank you.
So that just blows my mind. I got goosebumps on that one.
I got under your skin.
Yeah. Well, you always got under my skin. I thank you so much. And I think that what I'm really loving about this is, we're looking at it from thinking about voice and at that meta level. What is something that's really quite practical that someone could even just start to look at or reflect upon? Because I think this is a massive topic, and obviously everyone needs to go and see you and fill your calendar. So what's something that's a really, really hands-on, practical starting point for people?
I'm going to give you two things. Okay. So the first one, and you're all probably going to go, oh, not that again, but it's the breath.
I got sacked by a yoga teacher once because I can't breathe. So I'm not going to go, not that one. I'm going to go, yes, I know.
Yes.
Because I can't breathe. I don't breathe properly.
You know, and particularly as women, we tend to only use the upper clavicular breathing, which is like, let's say, a quarter of the lung.
Mm-hmm.
We're not taking that really deep breath in. And it can be something so superficial as, I don't want to take a deep breath in because that makes my stomach stick out. And society says I've got to have a flat stomach. Oh, I kid you not. When I tell people to take a breath in, it's like, well, I can't because my Spanx won't let
are
me.
too tight.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So get your Spanx off.
Yes.
Okay. And start taking deep breaths.
And let the belly come out.
Let the belly come out. Let the lungs expand, the diaphragm drop down into the belly, which immediately gives your voice the capacity to have the flexibility and the movement to evoke those vibrations that you want to have in the room. And I always go back to studying with Deepak Chopra and becoming certified in his practices, which is fundamentally the foundation, one of the foundations of the way that I work. And he always says, the breath reflects the mind and the mind reflects the breath. So if you've got a lot of things going on in your brain, you're going to start talking in full stop.
What if you're out of breath? I'm out of mind.
Or you can come up here and you can talk really fast, which is the other thing. I just want to get out of here. I'm going to talk really fast and I'm going to talk at you and I'm going to talk in point form and then I'm going to stop. Okay. So you've got to get connected to that breath because the chords, when we start talking scientifically, the chords and the larynx need to have exactly the right breath pressure to create and support, as I used that word before, to support your profile and to support the weight of the information that's coming through.
Wow. Yeah. Back to breath.
Back to breath.
That old chestnut.
Absolutely. And the next thing on top of that is taking your vocal cords to the gym. Okay. And I don't like sales, but I'm going to plug it anyway. The set of straws that I use with everyone, that everyone has to use in my studio, is absolutely the game changer. It costs you $90. And I say that because you can go away. You don't even have to come and have a session with me if you don't want one, but I highly recommend you do. But you can go away and you can actually have this toolkit and you can start working on feeling the voice. Stop listening to your voice and start feeling the voice, because as a leader, you feel into the conversation.
Yes.
And we're talking about gut, right?
Yes.
Well, you can't disconnect from the gut and start talking.
Well, you can't disconnect. It's all in this bag.
It's a feeling.
So, yes.
It's a feeling as a leader when you get up there and you make that impact. And you know that as a speaker, when you get up, when you've nailed it. Because what do? You come off stage and you're like, oh, that felt awesome.
Oh, I'm floating.
I nailed it.
I float off
and
stage.
you're running on adrenals for the rest of the day because you felt into it and you made that bigger connection.
Definitely. And I love that, feeling your voice as opposed to listening to it. Yeah. So I'll put the link to the straws on the website, everything for you.
Yeah.
No shameless plug, an absolute total plug.
Yeah. Well, it is, but it's for your benefit.
So have we got a straw handy? Can we do a quick demo?
I've always got straws here.
Oh, there we go. Quick demo. I love this.
So
this is like the shopping network now, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I'd love to do that. It'd be so fun. Hang on, let me get the other straw.
Oh, this is fascinating. I tell you, I'm so glad I'm actually in Lisa's vocal studio to have this session.
You were meant to come here, weren't you?
Yeah. Yes. So just so you know, Lisa and I have tried to connect about 40,000 times on Zoom and it hasn't worked. so I'm here in her studio. So here are the straws.
The straw concept was created by a professor of voice by the name of Ingo Titze in the US, and a lady that I work with quite closely. Her name is Mindy Pack, and she works with, similarly in the US, same kind of people, but high level singers. So we're talking Miley Cyrus, and she's the coach to them. And these are the straws that everybody uses. Okay. So there's 4 different size straws. Now, why is this important? Okay. Your vocal tract, everyone's vocal tract, just like every other part of the body, is unique to you. Okay. And whether you're male, female, if you've had a hard night, having a few bevies, if you've got a cold.
I never do that.
No. You're going to use different straws on different days and depending on your advanced state. So as a beginner, we use what we affectionately call as Big Betty.
Big Betty.
Okay. She's nice and thick, and we blow into that straw. Now, because I'm advanced, I don't get any what we call back pressure from this. I have to go to one of the smaller straws. So as I blow into the straw, you'll see my cheeks puff out.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so for those who are listening, it's my cheeks puff out, my larynx drops down, and my larynx opens. So I look a little bit like a bullfrog. Okay, so straight away, there's a whole heap of science, which I'll let you go on, and that's on the website. You can watch an actual video and see the science of what's happening.
Okay.
But by blowing into this and actually making sound, what I'm essentially doing is taking the cords to the gym, giving them a little dumbbell and saying, mate, you're going to stand up and you're going to carry it, right? And you make them start working and start strengthening. So it's like a little workout.
Wow.
For them.
So what's the benefit?
The benefit is particularly for ladies, and we're talking about feeling, okay? The benefit is that you're going to have a stronger voice generally. Mm-hmm. If you've got vocal fry, which is what I call the Kardashian, like, yeah, it's really cool, and you come down into that tone.
Like a frog.
Yeah, but you hear it a lot now today.
Is that sexy, is it?
Well, it's kind of cool.
Oh, is it?
It's cool.
Be one of the cool kids.
But there's no place for it in corporate world or professional world, but it's sneaking in. So the millennials are coming in with it. But I also see it, a lot of women, let's say in their 40s, become very fatigued at the end of the day, which can be because of hormones, it can health issues, stress, whatever it is that's going on. So we work other parts of our body, take it to the gym, make sure it's nice and strong and healthy. This is essentially making sure, because like I said before, making sure that your voice can support your profile. I bet you $100 that you haven't actually made sure that your voice is physically fit enough to take you into that meeting at that table.
Yeah,
you just think it's just going to happen because we take it for granted.
We do take it for granted, absolutely. I didn't know this gym existed, so that's fascinating. So I'm just mindful of time, and thank you for sharing that. And I really will put all the links and the resources in the webpage for this, because I think it's worth exploring for men and women. But I understand where you're coming from a woman's perspective. One of the things that I've just really, really appreciated about this conversation is we've got a choice. It's our responsibility. And the voice is something that we do take for granted. However, I think we need to stop taking it for granted and really paying attention to it to make sure that it is matching our profile. I love that. I think that's so important. And when we are wanting to influence and we're wanting to have a really high level seat at the table, being seen to be the leader that we want to be seen as, that includes the voice.
You have to sound like a leader.
Yeah, not just look at or bring the ideas, but you've got to sound.
It doesn't mean that you have to be very eloquent and you have to, talk like the queen. No. You look at Gary Vaynerchuk and you look at Bethany Frankel, I follow her in the States, and they've got essentially crazy voices. But the conviction and the confidence and the feeling behind it, I feel safe and I trust them. And ultimately, at the end of the day, if you feel safe with someone, you're going to invest in them at whatever level.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa Lockland Bell. Thank you for having me in your vocal studio. Lisa Lockland Bell. I just can't wait to... Maybe we need to have another one of these conversations.
Sure.
Because this has just been absolute gold. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It's been another episode of the Spark Self-Leadership Series. We'll see you for next time. Bye for now.